What if the choices that forged one of history's most feared and horrific armies were more complicated and complex than we previously thought? Historians have been examining and analyzing the might of Germany's war machine for decades, but the entire story about its tanks has long been mysterious. Finally, the curtains are being drawn back, and revelations as shocking as they are disturbing are now being revealed. Why did the Nazis, with all the knowledge and resources at their command, choose to employ gasoline motors when the more superior and efficient diesel option existed? And more significantly, how did this seemingly technical decision cascade throughout the battlefields of Europe to impact the course of wars that remade the contemporary world? Stay with us, for what we're about to reveal could forever change the way you perceive Nazi Germany and its war machine. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel Spark Science, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. By the time the Second World War broke out in 1939, Germany was no longer the broken and defeated country that it had been following the humiliation of the First World War. The Nazi Party had come to power with vows to restore the strength, pride, and international position of the country in the wake of the disastrous defeat of 1918. With unyielding resolve, they remilitarized, invested massive amounts in new technologies, and built up for war on a scale the world had not known before. It was not just a matter of rearmament, it was about rebirth. Germany was resolved to rise once more, greater than ever, and to take its rightful position as a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. When German troops invaded Poland, their troops were armed with cutting-edge weapons, extremely disciplined training, and a military doctrine that was geared to shock, awe, and overwhelm. This was not merely an act of warfare, it was a message to the world. It asserted that Germany aimed to win wars on its own terms, with unparalleled speed and precision. Each assault, each Wehrmacht movement, conveyed the same message: Germany was back, and it was prepared to dominate. By spring 1940, the scope of this ambition became indisputable. German troops rolled into France, Belgium, and the Netherlands with stunning speed. These were followed by the Panzer divisions, mobile forces of tanks designed to strike forcibly, cutting through enemy ranks before defenses could be activated. To see them was unforgettable, engines thundering, metal armor shining in the sunlight, and groups advancing with inexorable precision through towns and open land. Regular citizens in the streets either stood paralyzed with fear or ran away in panic, knowing automatically that these tanks were not going to just drive by, these tanks were there to occupy. Here's the dramatic reality: whenever these tanks moved into a city or a village, the mood changed immediately. Streets became deserted, stores rolled down their shutters, and quiet was replaced by the ominous thunder of engines that appeared to vibrate the earth. That noise alone, the relentless, rumbling beat of the panzers, had become one of the most dreaded sounds in occupied Europe. The Nazis knew it as well as anyone. Their tanks were not just a war machine but an instrument of fear, artfully crafted to shatter morale before a single bullet was ever fired. It was psychological warfare at its best. But beneath this frightful spectacle of power lay something so minute that even most onlookers didn't even notice: the engine. To some, it would look like a small thing, a mere technical decision lost amid a tank's design. But in war, things such as these could mean victory or defeat. Engines dictated how far a tank could travel before refueling, how fast it could turn to fight, and how quickly it could be refilled. All of these things were important in campaigns that spanned whole continents. Germany could have used diesel, which was safer, more fuel-efficient, and better suited for long campaigns. They did the opposite, however. Why? Why would such a power-obsessed, precision-obsessed, dominant regime opt for the less practical choice? To find out, we must look deeper into the Nazi strategy, their obsessions, and the unseen machinery of their war machine. Because in war, nothing is ever a detail. Not even the decision about what engine goes in a tank could have a ripple effect that could change the fortunes of soldiers, armies, and nations. This was no arbitrary choice, or lapse of attention. Military decisions in Nazi Germany were influenced by something greater than engineering, politics, ideology, capabilities, and the will of influential persons all came into play. Generals, engineers, and industrialists offered suggestions, but when Adolf Hitler had his say, it could overwhelm even the most rational or effective recommendations. Before we can consider why the Nazi tanks used gasoline, let us step aside and examine the men who controlled the machines. Who were the Nazis, after all, and why did they create this war machine that changed from weapon to symbol? What kind of commander insisted on tanks that were as much spectacle and intimidation as survival on the battlefield? To find this, we need to examine the ascension of the Nazi Party, the vision of its chiefs, and the warped world they aimed to build. The Nazi tanks were never simply war machines, they were ideological icons, symbols of power, hegemony, and fixation. Why did the Nazis take this particular road, going against the trends and behavior of other countries? And why must their tanks be as much about display as about effectiveness? Let us go a little deeper into this tale in order to reveal its answers. By the end of the 1930s, Germany was still choking under the darkness of the First World War. The nation had been humiliated by defeat, its economy shattered, and its citizens thirsting for deliverance. Inflation reached astronomical heights, unemployment ravaged millions, and public discontent made society fragmented. From this mayhem arose a political party that promised power, consolidation, and rejuvenation, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, better known as the Nazi Party. At the center of this movement was Adolf Hitler, a man motivated by compulsion, domination, and an unstoppable vision for dominance. He vowed to revive German pride, restore its broken economy, and establish a nation that was so powerful it could command respect on the planet. His message was brutal but compelling, giving hope to some, inciting fear and rage in others, but always demanding allegiance. By using propaganda, mass mobilizations, and press censorship, the Nazis remolded public opinion, making ordinary people active partners in a national awakening. By 1933, Hitler had become chancellor, and within a few months, Germany was a dictatorship. Political enemies were gagged, detractors were beaten into submission, and new legislation made Hitler's control complete. Factories which used to produce domestic items produced tanks, weapons, and planes instead. Railway lines and roads were remade to transport troops and supplies at breakneck speed. Every sector of society, from schools and farming to art and industry, was turned towards feeding the war machinery. The Nazis did not merely desire a powerful army. They desired control, which was gained through speed, technology, and shock attacks. Their most notorious military strategy was blitzkrieg, or lightning war, a tactic designed to stun enemies before they were able to respond. Blitzkrieg used rapid tanks, mechanized troops, and air support in a coordinated attack that left opponents stunned and shattered. And at the center of it all was the panzer divisions. These tanks weren't merely weapons, they were battering rams that broke through enemy lines and never ceased to move. Wherever they went, they created chaos in their path, dispersing soldiers, upsetting communications, and leaving no moment for counterattacks. The panzers didn't just wage war, they shaped it, controlling the tempo, the beat, and the very course of warfare. They were the very epitome of how frighteningly potent the Nazi war machine could become when being powered with speed, precision, and raw brutality. But beneath the glossy veneer of unstoppability, there were weaknesses, seemingly inconspicuous choices that betrayed contradictions within the Nazi system as a whole. Perhaps the most obvious of these was the fuel choice. To the average individual, a tank's engine was simply a piece of engineering, hidden in the blueprints and far removed from the battlefield. But in reality, it was one of the most crucial determinants of warfare. Engines determined how far the tanks could drive before refueling, how fast they could move in battle, and how exposed they were when reserves were low. In the cruel world of war, those kinds of details were what made all the difference between triumph and catastrophe. Diesel engines, employed with great frequency by other countries, presented certain undisputed benefits. They were safer, more difficult to set off, and significantly more economical, particularly for extended campaigns when supply lines were strapped thin. A diesel-powered tank could go farther, fight longer, and weather the sort of protracted warfare that Germany inevitably encountered on the Eastern Front. And yet, the Nazis opted for gasoline, more volatile, less efficient, more logistically burdensome. To anyone observing casually, the choice is inexplicable. Why would a country that took pride in engineering superiority deliberately select the less safe, less useful alternative? The explanation is not just in engineering but also in ideology, politics, and the individual fixations of those in power in the Third Reich. Nazi Germany was a government in which reason and dogma frequently clashed, in which military expediency occasionally yielded to spectacle, and in which Adolf Hitler's will sometimes held greater power than the most sensible advice of his generals. Decisions were not taken solely for efficiency but to fit the vision of the regime for mastery and intimidation. And so the gasoline engine was not merely an engineering decision, it was one of politics. It captured the intricate nexus of industry, resources, and leadership in Nazi Germany. Industry companies, industrialists, and party members all had a role to play in the decision-making process. Some advocated standardization throughout the military, some advocated quick production, and some others advocated favoring those industries that were already focused on gasoline. Ultimately, however, Hitler's voice was the deciding one. His influence meant that practicality was often sacrificed for ideology or personal preference. To see how one such decision could cascade across the battlefield, we must look at the bigger picture of Nazi strategy. The Nazis weren't just creating tanks to battle, they were creating tanks